I looked at my age report. I'm way older than I am, so I can go back to drinking beer and eating at McDonald's because evidently it ain't working.
The biological age we report out is capturing everything that's happened across your entire lifetime.
And so going back to what you said before, 20% of our, I guess, health outcome is based on genetics, what we inherited from parents and, their parents maybe, but 80% is really our lifestyle. And so,
only 5-6 years ago, when we could really start to measure biological aging in an accurate, precise, sensitive way and understood it a little bit more. So this clock right here is the best at predicting all-cause mortality and morbidity. And what we see here on you, Michael, is you're just going to be a little older, like I mentioned, about 4.15 years older.
Are you ready to revolutionize your health and reconnect to your primal self? Welcome to the Primal Shift Podcast. I'd like to thank Peluva for sponsoring this week's episode. Peluva is the brand behind my favorite zero-drop minimalist shoes with the distinctive 5-toe design that allows for correct dynamic movement of the foot when walking or running. The latter is impossible when toes are encased in a single box, even a white box. I love my Peluvas because they give me the most authentic barefoot style experience, but with sufficient cushioning to use them all day, even on hard surfaces. Peluvas are also incredibly stylish and I really like how they look. I've been using my Peluvas during intense CrossFit workouts, while walking the dog, and even during a recent 8-day trip to Disney World, and they've been unbelievably comfortable. They feel like walking barefoot on a putting green. Now you can try a pair of Peluvas with no risk by visiting peluva.com. That's peluva.com. Make sure to use code KUMMER for 15% off your first pair. And now back to the episode. All right, Hannah, thanks so much for joining me. This is a very important day in my life. I think a major milestone because I've realized that everything that I've been doing over the past couple of years in terms of trying to, eat better, sleep better, exercise more, do all the things right to slow down my aging. None of it has been working. I looked at my age report. I'm way older than I am, so I can go back to drinking beer and eating at McDonald's because evidently it ain't working.
Well, let's dive into it, Michael.
Yeah, let me give, what's your take on my report? I'm older than I should be.
Well, I think this is a very common misconception of biological aging, right? Everyone wants to test their biological age. And if they don't get an age that's younger or 10 or 20 years younger, it's what's going on? What am I doing wrong? And I think we need to step back and think about this more in terms of the big picture and ask ourselves, what does this metric actually mean? Why am I testing this metric? And to answer that question, this is a biological age outcome that is capturing how you are aging historically, right? It's not just a moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
The biological age we report out is capturing everything that's happened across your entire lifetime. So think back to when you didn't have everything in your control.
When
right?
I was actually drinking beer every day.
When you're actually drinking beer every day. So, I think that's what I said in the beginning. A really big misconception about this test is I'm doing everything right now. Why am I older? And we have done, I think, a pretty good job here at my company, TruDiagnostic, on educating what that really means. This is capturing everything that's happened through childhood, any traumatic events or stressors, your entire environment growing up, whether it be different socioeconomic status, whether it be different education levels, any type of flu, viral infection, disease diagnosis, surgeries, whether they be unelected, elected, I can go on and on, right? Or any disease diagnosis as well.
Right.
Those are going to cause fluctuations throughout our pace of aging in our lifetime. And that's really where you end up with this biological age. Is how have you been aging across your entire lifetime? And of course, different events are going to cause that to go up and go down as well.
All right. So, and we're going to take a very close look and we're going to share it on the screen as well. My specific report and kind of dissect it a little bit and see, what's good, what's not so good, and what can I do to, maybe improve even more. But before we do that, maybe just for the sake of, everyone's understanding, what is epigenetics? What is epigenetic testing? What does it tell us and what does it mean? Can you maybe?
Yes. Epigenetics, what does it mean? Epi is a Greek prefix. It actually means above. So we're looking above or on top of the DNA. It's really DNA regulation, right? A lot of people are familiar with genomics or seem to be. So I like to compare it to genetics. And
Hmm.
genetics is really your infrastructure, your hardware of the body. It's the nature you get from your parents, 50% from parent one, 50% from parent two.
Right.
But your epigenetics is going to be the nurture. It's how you are interacting with your behavior and the environment. And it's really considered to be about 80% of all of your health outcomes, where you're in control now. And your genomics or your genetics is only going to be about 20% of your entire health outcomes. So it's really powerful that we're learning we are in the driver's seat of our own health, right? We're no longer just a victim to the predispositions that our family have passed on to us, whether it be metabolic disease, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really exciting that we're able to take this gene expression data and report it out to reflect our number one risk factor of all cause mortality and morbidity, which is aging.
Okay. And so gene expression means the activation, whether or not a gene is actually doing something in a particular moment, or what?
Exactly. Yes. And we have about 50 million of those processes going on in the body at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a specific epigenetic modification that we measure here at TruDiagnostic, my company, and that's going to be what's called DNA methylation. That is quite literally explaining those on and off switches. So
Mm-hmm.
if something's methylated, stop sign, it's not going through the entire process, the central dogma, we're going to end up with a phenotypic outwards expression. You're just not expressing or coding for that gene.
Mm-hmm.
But if that methylation is not present or the position is unmethylated, green light, your gene expression is turned on, and we're going through the central dogma. You're going to have expression levels there. So the goal really isn't we want to turn all genes on, right? We want to turn all genes off. There's some good genes and there's some really bad genes.
Right.
And an example I like to give people is, hey, you want your oncogenes or your cancer genes methylated and turned off,
Mm-hmm.
but you want your tumor suppressor genes
Right.
unmethylated, expressed, and turned on to suppress those tumors. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really a healthy balance. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to is how can we balance our lifestyle, our social interactions, our health and well-being throughout our entire course of life to have the best, not only lifespan, but health span too,
Mm-hmm.
those healthy years at the end of our life.
Right. And so going back to what you said before, 20% of our, I guess, health outcome is based on genetics, what we inherited from parents and, their parents maybe, but 80% is really our lifestyle. And so, there is this saying that, your genetics load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. And I guess, that reflects what you said very well. It's not just, I have bad genes. No, you have a poor lifestyle, causing
Exactly.
most of the issues that you're facing. And so, all right. So in terms of aging process, then how does that whole, gene methylation and epigenetics influence aging? And how can you even tell how old someone is biologically by looking at genetic expression?
Yeah, that's a great question. It goes back to the history of this field, which actually came out after the first iPhone. So it's very, very new. I want people to understand that we're still in early days. It's really cutting edge science and what makes it so exciting. So about 10 years ago, only a decade ago, a professor at UCLA by the name of Dr. Steve Horvath presented at a conference that by looking at these on and off switches, we can predict how old we are. Like the R correlation value, so how correlated it is, these methylation markers to aging was above, 0.99, which is considered excellent. And I wasn't at that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I know many people who were, and they just go, the room was stunned. They were dumbfounded. You just don't find correlations like that in science. It never happens. So we knew that Dr. Steve Horvath, I would say, knew at the time that work was very, very special. It wasn't really until 2018, 2019, only 5-6 years ago, when we could really start to measure biological aging in an accurate, precise, sensitive way and understood it a little bit more. because we're able to better power these algorithms. And what we're doing is we're using what we call these epigenetic clocks or biological age clocks. And we don't really, I never really hear anyone define, well, what's a clock, right? I mean, it makes sense with aging, right, as time goes on. But that just means we're taking a specific number of these gene expression markers and looking at them in a way which is reflective or predictive of outcomes. So there's all these different biological age clocks or epigenetic clocks. None of them are the same. They were all trained on specific data for a specific purpose and a specific outcome, and hopefully validated depending on the study as well. So we know aging's super complicated, right? It's multifactorial. We keep getting these new hallmarks of aging republished, or new ideas of why or how we're aging, and epigenetic regulation is a hallmark of aging. But it looks really, really promising. And I know I'm biased, probably the best one out there right now, because it is by far the most predictive of outcomes. And if we're measuring something, we need to know what it's going to lead to so we can actually decrease that risk and affect change by using interventions in between.
So you mentioned correlation a lot, and I'm, not a scientist, but I know that a lot of scientific evidence out there is, especially in the nutrition field, that's kind of where my interests lie a lot. It's observational, right? So you observe something and then you establish a correlation, like, owning a TV, increases your risk of heart disease. Well, but it's not the TV causing the heart attack, right? It's probably confounding factors that are, associated with owning a TV, maybe. How much of that plays into those epigenetic clocks, meaning that what is the baseline? And because at the end of the day, there is no one who is perfectly healthy, right? Who we can say, okay, this is our, patient X. We know if this guy is now 40 years old and the epigenetic clock says he's 40, then we have a good baseline. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, you made a good point there, right? You're talking about correlation versus causation. Right. None of this, I would say, is purely causation at this point. I think epigenetics is getting the closest to actually saying this is looking like, causation in terms of aging. So there are actually some really cool epigenetic biological age clocks that are causal and measuring kind of damage through aging as well, that are getting closer and closer and chipping away at that. But again, this is going to be correlation. There's going to be a lot of epidemiological association studies, right? What we're able to do, though, is really zoom out and say, all right, what are we really good at measuring and predicting? That's what these epigenetic markers, or where they really succeed and surpass any other type of biomarker. So let me give you a couple examples. You took the test, Michael, right? We sent you a kit, you pricked your finger. It was probably, 10, 15 drops of blood on the blood spot card. You send it back, you get results in 2 to 3 weeks. Well, what could we actually report out by looking at that raw data file? We look at about 1 million of those methylation markers. We can tell you your smoking status. We can tell you your alcohol consumption. We can tell you where you live down to the zip code based on your environmental toxins. I'm not saying we report out on all of this, but that's the information we're getting. So we're seeing epigenetics become quite literally the fingerprint of your life. I mean, maybe it's better than even your actual fingerprint, because it's changing due to your specific environment. And it's very unique because it's truly N of 1 precision medicine at its finest, where, because a supplement or because something works for one person, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. We're very unique in our own biology. So the issue, or I would say the limitation with this approach, is really two things. And I think things we can overcome, which are the size of the data. It's massive and we can still collect a lot more. And then number 2, our imagination. This is just such a new field. It's really hard to think about a new novel biomarker coming out in 2024, right? We think we know everything already with our CBC panels, our hormones as it relates to health. So we're really starting to see a paradigm shift happen, which is uncomfortable. It's change. It's going to take some time, but I'm telling you, it's happening. And I do see this being, point of care standard practice in even GP offices within the next decade or so, and maybe even sooner, depending if there are specific disease predictors outside of just aging. I'm talking, general health, wellness to a sense.
Mm-hmm. It all sounds incredibly interesting because, I mean, I see it every day, and not, obviously, again, I'm not a scientist, neither am I a doctor, but, people have issues, and someone says, hey, but I've been doing this and it's, issue is gone. Someone else does the exact same thing, doesn't work, and I've already seen it from a, very, if you break it down to, very simple things like, how carb intake, versus, fat. Are you more efficient at burning carbs versus fat? And that also may depend on your genetics, but also, everything that you've experienced, over the course of your lifetime, all the toxins maybe that you have in your body, your environment, your stress levels. There are so many things that influence what might be the best diet, the best exercise regimen, the best, whatever the case might be. And I think the information that you collect and analyze and interpret can help doing that. And I certainly hope that, in the future, this is going to be used for prevention in the one hand, and not just for coming up with, fancier pharmaceuticals, that completely ignore lifestyle changes and making lifestyle changes. Because based on what you said before, 80% of our health outcome is based on lifestyle, right? It's not the lack of pharmaceuticals that we are missing. It's probably the wrong or poor lifestyle choices we're making that put us into certain positions. Now,
Yeah.
are there any ethical considerations in terms of collecting that data, having that information, and who has access to it, who doesn't? What's your take on that?
Absolutely. These are really great questions, Michael. You're hitting all of them on the dot. So this would depend by company, right? You're going to have to ask each company their policies first and foremost. So I can tell you what we do here at TruDiagnostic and how we differ. And I think how we really excel in that area is, first and foremost, we own our own lab.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think we're the only epigenetic testing company that owns our own lab. We're located in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm in our cool podcast room. I see the lab right across from me, across the hallway. And the sample is only sent here and touched by our laboratory technicians' hands. So, if you go through a company who's outsourcing to another lab, chances are there's some type of data use agreement, data sharing agreement that you are clicking yes to in their terms of service and privacy policy without really knowing it.
Yeah.
Right. We are a CLIA certified lab. We're CAP certified. So those are just fancy ways of saying, hey, we meet all the rules and regulations and check those boxes. We're also, SOC 2 compliant, use secure Amazon Web Service for our cloud database as well. They're, I would say definitely the best in the world, one of the leaders in this space in data storage. So we take data compliance security very, very seriously. Not to mention, we're a privately very small, intimate company as well. So we're not selling or using that data in any way.
Okay. All right. Maybe with that out of the way, let's dive into my report and see what damage I've done.
Let's do it.
Over the past 42 years or so. And maybe then, because I took some of those tests, not exactly the same, because I know that OMICM H test is new, relatively new. But I did 2 of those H tests in the past with you guys. And there is also, it seems like, at least, if nothing else, my biological age in comparison to my calendar age has gone down by a year. So I don't know, maybe that's a positive thing or not. Or
awesome. Very positive. Yeah. It seems like you've taken the test from like multiple sources. So I can definitely combine all them. So you can start to see the change of them as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So here's the summary report, right? We have you here, Michael, and we have your omic M age. So let me try and zoom out a little bit for you here. What are we seeing on this omic M age? I'm happy to hop right into it, Michael, and you hop in with questions if you have any.
Go ahead.
Awesome. So what is this omic M age? Well, this omic M age is named omic for the layers of the multiome in the body. We have our DNA, our genes, our epigenetics. We have our metabolomics that are going to feed into our proteins, and then our phenotypic outwards expression level. So we want to combine omic data, different layers of our underlying biology, to create the best biological clock ever created. And we did this with Harvard. So this clock right here is the best at predicting all-cause mortality and morbidity. And what we see here on you, Michael, is you're just going to be a little older. Like I mentioned, about 4.15 years older. So your biological age is going to be 46.47 compared to this, 42.32. So you can think back, right? You mentioned some beers were had as you were growing up, right? There's going to be different life events. So we're grabbing an accumulation across your lifetime. This isn't something to be too worried about. I'll tell you why. Because when we actually compare you to the rest of our TruDiagnostic population, you're in the 52nd percentile. So you're actually just a little bit above average. So most people are aging a little bit faster at your same chronological age. And this is important to talk about the population here because the TruDiagnostic population is very, very healthy, right? It is about 20,000 people you're being compared to that are extremely optimized and looking to optimize, right? They're doing things that we're talking about on this podcast already and into their health and wellness. Now, what happens is because we have that increase in biological age, we're going to have an increase, just a very small, ever so slightly increase in disease risk, right? Increased risk of death, cancer, heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, COPD, and depression. These are pretty small. They're not too worrisome by any means. We know if we're older, we're going to have that increased risk. If we're younger, we're going to have that decreased risk. How do we change these? Well, we change them by actually decreasing our overall omic M age because this is a risk due to biological age and aging faster. And we can talk about different things we actually want to target here as well. The main 4 things are going to be lifestyle related, where we dig into sleep, nutrition, stress, and physical exercise. Those are usually the top 4 we really want to dive into and focus more on those lifestyle factors first before even moving into supplementation or medication or procedural-based therapies. So these are relative risk, Michael, meaning it's your risk at this time according to your aging. It's not an absolute risk saying, hey, you're going to die right now or you're going to become diseased at this point. So it's just talking about, hey, this is your relative risk at this moment according to your biological age. And again, any outcome you see on this report here is going to be from epigenetics. It is going to be all changeable too, which is something very positive. Any questions about that one?
No, makes sense so far.
So the next outcome is going to be the pace of aging metric. You're familiar with this one, aren't you, Michael?
Yes. Yeah. That was the first time I did. I'm like, okay, at least I'm aging slower than I should. So
yes. So this is the one that's super, super positive. This is, let me give a little bit of background on this one because it's really fun to talk about and it's really impressive. When we compare this to the overall omic M age, this is more of a 3 to 6 month current pace of aging, right? So it's saying, all right, Michael, we know you have a little bit of historical aging. You've been working on reducing that because it seems like your pace is below 1. So for those of you who can't see the screen, this looks more like a speedometer. It's a value between 0.6 and 1.4, and it tells you how quickly you're aging biologically for every 1 chronological year. So the study took place in Dunedin, New Zealand. That's why it's called that weird, funky name. And they measured about 1,100 New Zealanders across a 50-year longitudinal period. And they're still testing them today to make this algorithm better and better and continue to collect more data. So it's a really unique study. They have about a 96% retention rate and continue to grow that over time. So you come out at 0.87. Michael. So you're aging 0.87 biological years for every 1 chronological year. So this looks awesome. We at least want to be below 1. I usually call like 0.95 to 0.99 the danger zone because you don't want to be teeter-tottering over the 1 mark there because we know if you're above 1, your risk of all-cause mortality and morbidity increases by about 50% over the next 7 years. So you look really good here. The goal is going to be usually around 0.7, 0.75. That way, if you think about it in quarters, people who keep that there and keep it steady, they're shaving off a biological age after 3 years.
Right.
So this looks really good on you. It's really associated with lifespan, health span outcomes, things like grip strength, gait speed, overall cognitive function, brain health, even specific MRI imaging and, volume of the brain. So it has a lot of great connections and correlations just to overall, functional movements and even facial aging as well. So we usually share this image you see here. So we have an image on the screen right now that shows people, a male and female, who are all the same age chronologically. They're all 45 years old chronologically, but they look very, very different according to their aging. So the fastest aging cohort members look older compared to the average and compared to the slowest too.
Right. Makes sense.
So that's a really good one. People, you being in this field, this is a pretty common idea that really it's known as phenotypic expression, phenotypic variation, right? We're going to look different on the outside, and that's what this aging is really measuring. Is how do we look on the inside, right? What are we doing on a cellular level?
Yep.
So that's the omic MH. That's the pace of aging. Those are definitely the most exciting as it relates to our overall aging outcomes, and the ones that are most predictive of health. The number one therapy, Michael, you may have seen this study before, for slowing down that Dunedin pace is going to be caloric restriction. So just a 10% overall caloric restriction in healthy non-obese adults over a 2-year period. That's the calorie randomized control trial that came out about a year and a half ago, last year in 2023 in January.
Yeah, I hope people still take that seriously, because based on that, the news reports the other day, just skipping one meal increases your overall all-cause mortality by 92% or something. Did you see that? Absolutely.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
especially everything coming out regarding skipping breakfast and whatnot as well. I don't know. I think it depends. Depends on what you're doing, really, from intermittent fasting, timing of eating, your circadian rhythm setup. So there are multitude of factors that plays a role in it.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have in this? One thing that I'm very surprised or not as excited to hear your opinion on is the fitness aspect.
Oh yeah, do you want me to hop to that one now?
Let's check that out.
All right.
And I'm saying this in the context that I do CrossFit. I'm 42 point something years old, as we know, and I want to argue that I'm fitter than any 20-year-old that I compete against. So seeing that my fitness age is over 50, I'm like, how is that possible?
Well, let's talk about
40, 48, sorry.
48, yeah. not quite over 50. Yeah, let's talk about it. So, again, what is this? What goes into it, right? How is it built? What is it really reporting out on? So this is where we get more into like the characteristic and trait-based reports. So this should not be used as a primary outcome, like I've been harping on for the omic MH and the pace of aging. This is an interesting algorithm that's combining aerobic, anaerobic-based fitness and your baseline omic MH too. So omic MH is included in this calculation.
Right.
So since you're already aging quicker from an omic MH standpoint, it didn't help you here either, right? So you're a little bit higher, even higher than your omic MH by about 6.35 years. So what else makes up this algorithm? There's something else that's causing this to be a little bit older. And this is an algorithm we created that's based on the infrastructure built by Kristen McGreevy out of UCLA. She created this DNA methylation fit age algorithm. It's based on that same concept. And we call this one instead, the omic M fit age. And what else is actually included in this is going to be 4 physical fitness functions. So you have your grip strength. We actually quantify your grip strength, your gait speed, your VO2 max, and your FEV1. Now, these are all functional markers that have been associated with aging. How the heck are we measuring them just through your blood spot card? Well, we actually took, in the creation of this algorithm, thousands and thousands of people's physical function outcomes alongside of their epigenetics and are able to create an algorithm that predicts these outcomes just using epigenetics. So It's an algorithmic interpretation. It's another biological age clock. In particular, we call these EBPs, or epigenetic biomarker proxies, where again, epigenetics is the input and you have something else as the output.
Would the
So
gait speed influence like sprint performance?
yes, yeah, it's, the technical term for gait speed is going to be, your walking speed, and this is going to be meters per second. So it's, not necessarily sprint, more walking, right? But it's a good question to clarify, I think.
All right.
So
just asking because I at one point in my earlier years I was the 5th fastest 100-meter sprinter. So if this says I'm slower than females, I'm like, I don't know if that's right.
You're like, wait a second. And it's a good call out too, because these markers aren't perfect, right? They're a proxy. We can make them as perfect as possible if we had, a lot more data and train this, on and on and on.
Right.
So they're not going to be exact. They're going to be inferences or proxies, but they're going to be still pretty good biomarkers. So for you, you're in the 50th percentile for grip strength and gait speed. Like, this looks great. This talks to me more about your CrossFit experience, where, we really want to maybe focus on a little bit more as well is the VO2 max and the FEV1. So these ones are the lower outcomes for you, which is probably bringing down that omic MFIT age. I just did another recording earlier with someone, a report review, and they had the same type of trend. And usually the response I get is, oh, really? Like, I don't want to focus on aerobic exercise, right? So my advice here would be, we need to do more aerobic, right? Really long distance running, more cycling, swimming, biking, hiking. Focus on exercises that are going to work on your oxygen uptake or your force expiratory volume, which is the FEV1, or kind of the lung expansion.
Gotcha.
So yeah, a lot of people follow the same trend. I lift weights myself. I like don't prefer to do cardio. Maybe I'll try and get my 10,000, 15,000 steps a day in. If anything, I choose the stair stepper, 10 minutes, 500 steps on the stair stepper. I'm good to go.
Yeah. All right.
So that's the physical fitness report.
Okay.
There's one outcome I want to talk about on here as well that I think can greatly help your aging.
Okay.
So remember back to when you took this test, how you were feeling at that time. I want to cover the CD4 CD8 T cell ratio. So in very simple terms, this is a ratio healthcare providers use and look at, which is informative on the overall function of the immune system. It's just the best marker to look at. And why is it the best marker? Well, it's the best marker because it is very informative on disease states. You can see some of the outcomes in the graph here on the right. If this is low, means you're immunosuppressed at the time you took this test. And we actually see yours being low, Michael. So you want this cell type ratio to be between 1 and 4, at least 1. You're going to be at 0.29.
Yeah, I would say that's. I think we had COVID again. I mean, we didn't test obviously, but we were all had symptoms that are felt very familiar to a couple of years ago, and so I suspect something was going on at the time, but I don't know exactly what it was.
Absolutely. So yeah, any type of suppression, viral load, et cetera, it's going to cause overall dependencies on the immune system, and you're fighting that infection, or you're working against it. So your immune system's going to be suppressed. So what can we do for this? We need to load you up with some vitamin D, zinc, there's some growth hormone secretagogues out there that can help with better thymic rejuvenation as well. Getting out in the sun more, and any type of natural overall immune boosting regimens could be super helpful. IVs, vitamin C, glutathione, things like that.
Right. Okay, interesting.
That should help. Like, obviously, this will boost your immune system too, but that should help your overall aging, even your omic MH to a sense. And so obviously, measure your D levels alongside of that. We don't want those to be too high, but they need to be high enough.
Right. And then, just seeing all of that, obviously, it makes sense to perform that test. How often should you perform that test? Because ideally you want to see a positive trend, right? This is a snapshot. you want to have another snapshot and another snapshot, and then hopefully, see a trend in the right direction.
Thank you for saying that. Because this is a very fun, sexy topic right now. Everyone wants to test their aging. They think it's really cool. And it is cool. Don't get me wrong. But they only do it once. And it's like, hey, if you're testing your blood-based values, right? Your CBC panel, your triglycerides, your lipids, et cetera, your insulin levels, if you are testing your hormone levels, right? I get that done every 6 months. I do this, I do my own testing right alongside it to actually see that trend. So the second test is more important than the first test. The third test is more important than the second and first, and so on and so forth. We need to test longitudinally to measure that actual trend and point of change.
Makes sense. Was that the only immune thing that was going on, or are there other tests in there, or other reports that are worth looking at?
Yeah, let me take one. Well, I don't know if this one would be worth looking at, but we could definitely discuss it because I think people are most familiar with it, which is the telomeres, right? So have you tested your telomeres previously, ever?
I think with your test in 2020, I believe I had the...
But just no other outside companies, right?
No.
Okay. So I bring this up and, we'll probably not remove it from the reports right away, but definitely phase it out. Telomeres, for those who are unfamiliar, these are the caps of your chromosomes, a part of your DNA that keep everything tight and regulated and coiled up. So as we age, think of it like a shoestring. As we age, we wear tennis shoes over and over. Our shoelaces start to fray at the ends. This is what happens to telomeres as we get older. So it was once thought that these had a really huge relationship to aging, like we thought we solved aging when we discovered telomeres. Now they're just very poor predictors of health. So they're still correlated, but very, very poorly. A lot of this is hereditary as well from your parental side, your dad's side. However, we still want to do kind of a sanity check here. We want to look at many hallmarks of aging as possible. So, Michael, you look good here. You're 7.2 kilobases. If we extrapolate that, you're 40 years old based on telomeres. So this one sounds really good, but again, it's one that we're not super excited about. And you're above the 62nd, or you're in the 62nd percentile. So you're doing better than 60% of the population. And you want to have longer telomeres. You want to be in the higher population percentile here. So you're doing great. If someone has lower telomeres, they're in the 20th percentile or lower, we're thinking oxidative stress, inflammation, senescent cell buildup. We need to give them some senolytics or antioxidant-based therapies.
Okay, so that I think actually I there is that peptide epithalon, is it? To help?
Yeah.
Does that do anything? Is it worth taking, in your opinion?
In my opinion, no. I think a lot of people would disagree with me. There's no, I don't know how that information got spread. Hey, epitalon lengthens telomeres. I don't think there's any definitive study showing, before and after lengthening of telomeres. If so, we don't know the mechanism of action, right? It probably clears out senescent cells, which is where your short telomeres live. So it looks like you're getting longer telomeres before and after. But epitalon is a great peptide for other outcomes. You'll see a lot of your blood-based values become improved with it as well. But I don't know that it necessarily targets telomeres directly.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it looks good. Michael, you're aging very well. If we even pulled up some of those longitudinal results, which I can get connected to, your previous reports, we will. I think, how many times have you taken it?
That was the third, but the one I took actually within the same month. One was October 1st, 2020, and then October 26th, 2020.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to get all of those connected. I mean, that's you were actually probably one of the first users of the test. I mean, we launched in July of 2020, right? And we'll ran our first test in 2020, launched in like January,
right?
And sent out kits right before COVID. So you were one of the I'm sure very first users at least, and then 4 years after, it seems like you have made positive changes to reduce that biological aging over time. So that's why I tell people to get started now, right? People come and say, oh, my biological age is still older. Well, imagine, how much older it could have been
Right.
4 or 5 years ago,
Uh,
right? We want to see that change, and we want to see the positive change too.
yeah, and one thing that when I got my first report, and I think at the time I was 30. How old was I? When it was 24 years ago. So I was 38, and my report said I'm 6 years or something older. And I'm like, I was kind of discouraged. I'm like, well, I've been doing keto for 2 years. How is this possible?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then I realized, well, I abused, not knowingly, of course, my body for over 3 decades. And I cannot expect by just making changes for a few years to reverse everything and then be 20 years younger, and that's unrealistic. I
Yeah.
think the most important point or takeaway should be that if you're aging faster, at least slow it down. If nothing else, slow it down so you continue aging now at a normal or maybe better, slower pace than you were before. And you can't change your past. I mean, you can, but there's only so much you can do, right? And at some point, there is also acceptance is necessary that yes, maybe you had a rough, first 20 years and you're paying for it. I mean, that's what it is. There is no get out of jail free card.
Right. You're exactly right. And it's I like that mentality at the end too. It's very hard to see any biological ages younger than chronological age, even more so a reversal, right? Because if you're taking this test every 6 months or every 12 months, you're actually aging
Right.
6 months or 12 months. So I mean, you're working against the clock quite literally. So it's really hard to see, any type of reversal, or it's really hard to sustain and keep that pace of aging even at like 0.7, 0.75. It's a challenge. I mean, it takes consistency, it takes discipline, and as humans, we're not very good at that, right? So it's creating something that's unique for you, that works for your schedule, that works for your lifestyle, and trying to do the best you can to stick to that.
But it's good knowing. I'm a huge fan of having all the information and making decisions. And if that decision is, what, I accept that I'm aging at the rate that I'm aging, and I'm not going to do anything about it, then at least you made that decision. But not knowing what you're doing and wishing that you could have done something different, I think that's really where I'm like, know and make an informed decision instead of just blindly following whoever and not being aware of what's happening. Cool. So you mentioned it before we got on, before we started recording, but yes, I think I do have a discount code for sure, an affiliate link. So we're going to put all of that in the show notes. If people want to try that out, I'm going to, continue doing those tests. I want to say at least once a year to kind of see, where I'm heading and to kind of gauge if how I feel and how effective my interventions are based on how I feel, if they actually are reflected in the data, because at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding and it doesn't really matter what I think is right. If my body disagrees, then, I need to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I continue to hopefully have conversations like this and educate others. The more people that we can get tested, the more we can get this out to the masses is really the end goal. It's helping people live longer, live healthier, fruitful lives, accomplishing all their goals they want to accomplish at the end of their life, whether it's start a new company, have a grandchild, great grandchild, right? Get a new puppy, new dog, and just continue to be surrounded and have quality of life. So I love your messaging, your podcast, everything you do, Michael. And hopefully this will be, become more accessible, cheaper to everyone. Because we realize that's one of the limitations too.
Yeah. One more question before we wrap it up. If there are new clocks coming out in the future, since you have the data, can you rerun the data using that new algorithm, or how does it work?
So we have one coming out next week. Fingers crossed. At the time of when we're recording this, and it goes published, hopefully it should be done. But it's the Symphony Age clock. So it's the aging of 11 different organ systems. We created that with Yale: your brain, heart, lung, liver, pancreas, skin, blood, hormone, a couple others as well. So we can take your raw file. Michael, I probably wouldn't want to take yours from 2020. I'd probably want to take yours from the one you just did, and we can apply that. But yeah, people pay a small fee, $15, and then we upgrade every single one of the reports. You don't have to pay 15 per report. So you'll get the ones from 2020 anyways, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, we obviously want to look at the more recent ones. So that'll be available next week, and I'm happy to upgrade you and
Yeah,
give that
maybe
to you
we
when it's
can then
ready.
overlay that because it's going to be a couple of weeks anyway before the episode is out. So we can then, I'm going to, will I be able to do this in the portal, or how does it going to work?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, you'll get your results updated in the portal.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I can just at least take a screenshot and overlay it and see how, my organs have been aging. And then the other thing that new, what is it called? The OMIC-MH report
Yep,
for
Omic MH.
my older, at least for one of the older tests back in 2020, because I know that if I look at the test reports, it shows. Oh, maybe one more thing that I saw in both reports, specifically in the old ones, but also in the new one, that intrinsic versus extrinsic age.
Yeah,
Because one of mine is way older and the other one is way younger, like 38 to 50 something. What does that mean?
Yeah, we're getting rid of those ones in the next couple
Nothing
of weeks.
to worry about.
yeah, they're older clocks.
Okay.
And was our main report at one point until we created the better ones. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then for the sake of comparison, can I use that old report and get that latest age, so to say, from an old report?
Yeah, the Omic MH. Yeah, absolutely. I'll get that into your account for you.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it, because then we're going to overlay that as well. So then I can really see, have I been speeding up or slowing down as far as my
exactly. Okay. We need to know that, right? That change.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much, Hannah. I appreciate your time and all the insights. Super interesting episode. I'll keep you posted when it's going to go live. We'll tag you guys on all the social platforms where we add the clips and the whole shebang, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Michael.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Coming up next week on the Primal Shift podcast, Michael Kummer takes a deep dive into the puzzling case of elevated HbA1c levels, despite being on a low-carb, ketogenic, or even carnivore diet. In episode 63, Michael shares his personal experience with unexpected HbA1c results that put him in the pre-diabetic range, even though his diet and lifestyle should suggest otherwise. He explores how factors like red blood cell lifespan and overall metabolic health can lead to seemingly contradictory blood sugar readings. This episode offers crucial insights for anyone monitoring their health and metabolic markers, so be sure to tune in for this eye-opening conversation.